Okay. Well, 3 minutes after the hour, we'll get things kicked off. I'll go through my soliloquy before I hand it over to James. But I want to welcome and thank everyone for joining us for another SEMpdx virtual event. We've been trying to continue these every month so that we can deliver the greatest speakers and minds in the industry to keep us updated and abreast of the ever-changing digital marketing world. Today we have James Svoboda, CEO of Web Ranking. He'll be joining us to talk about changes within keyword targeting within Google. But before we start that, want a couple brief announcements from SEMpdx. Again, we are continuing our free membership drive throughout the length, width, and breadth of this kind of lockdown quarantine time. Even though we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, we're going to continue on and making sure that we are fostering the digital marketing community in and around Portland. So if you are interested in joining us as a member, go to sempdx.org/membership. Sign up for free today. Please join us, and we'll have some exciting announcements coming forward. One of those will be around Engage 2021. We're going to keep it virtual this year. But again, it is something that we obviously want to make sure we have as many people included as possible. We'll have some announcements coming, and so keep an eye out on your inbox in the coming week around announcements around speakers, scheduling, and of course, login rules and things along those lines. Of course, we always want to highlight our charity of choice. That is Elevate Oregon this year. Go to elevateoregon.org, find out more about their mission about empowering students in and throughout Oregon for employment and everything along those lines, and all the great mission that they're doing over there at Elevate Oregon. We're going to have some announcements coming up soon. But again, without any further ado, I want to kick it over to James Svoboda, CEO of Web Rankings, and his presentation today. James, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So
that's all right. We're now seeing some slides here.
Okay. All right. So Google, what the heck are you doing to our keywords, right? It's been a crazy couple of years for search marketers and trying to figure out what Google's doing and the changes they're making and how they're affecting us. So today we're going to talk about what's going on with keyword matches, the changes that are going on, and what we're doing to compensate for them and to move forward as search marketers. Okay, so we already went over pretty much who I am. I'm also a founder of the Minnesota Search Marketing Association. It is a SEMpdx sort of sister association here in Minnesota, where I currently live. I've been around for 20-something years now doing search marketing, and I really love this career. One of the things I also love are keywords. And I love how when you're looking at a set of keywords in analytics or Google Ads, they often can tell you a story if you know what you're looking for. So for instance, Portland restaurants and restaurants in Portland. It's a very, very common and steady set of keywords. And Google Trends shows us data back to 2004. And it looks pretty much today as it did back then. It hasn't grown in popularity, it hasn't shrunk. It's only grown because search volume in general has sort of grown. It's a very stable set of keywords. But we also look at the keyword sets and understand what's changing within the market. So for instance, restaurants near me started to come on board in 2004 as mobile started to increase in popularity. So now today we have restaurants near me competing with local Portland-based queries for the same traffic. But which is more important? Which is more significant? And it kind of depends on where you're at in the country, where you're at in the world, and your business model. So now if we look at Google Trends data and we segment it just for Portland, we can see that near me searches overtook restaurants in Portland a couple years ago, and they're still significant. But restaurants in Portland is still significant if you're a restaurant in Portland as well. It's part of telling that story. Now, April of last year, everybody kind of knows what happened. We went into quarantine, we went into lockdown, and traffic just dipped. Now, as we're telling the story and we're reading the story back a year later, we can identify that trend and what happened then. And that will forever be a blip in the history of restaurants in Portland from a marketing and a search standpoint. And that's the story that we like to read. That's the story that we tell to clients when we talk to them about results year over year, month over month, and trying to identify what's working, what's not, and what are the trends. So it's part of reading the story of our keywords. Now, keyword matching from a Google Ads and a Microsoft Ads perspective, it used to be accurate, predictable, and exact. It's not quite that anymore. It used to be where you would bid on a keyword like peacock, and you could understand the very common query matching patterns that your keywords have been mapped to your search terms. It was predictable. It was very predictable. And well, things have changed, and it's not quite exactly what it used to be. And we can't exactly predict everything anymore. It's unfortunate, and it's a little silly. And this is a pretty accurate representation of what keyword mapping has turned into from where it used to be. Now, one of the things we think about in keywords is keywords aren't search terms. They are the doors and the windows that give us insight into search queries that users are searching for. So they're a lens, so to say, on how we target them, but they don't tell the whole story. They just tell you a version of it. And sometimes that window and that door is clear, and sometimes it's opaque, kind of like a kaleidoscope. And it's up to us as search marketers to understand that keywords are a little fuzzy and they're getting fuzzier, but to optimize and manage our search terms is really, in the end goal, what we're after. So how did we get to exactish? Well, in 2010, Google launched Broad Match Modifier. It was a great feature at the time. It allowed us to anchor certain words or all words in broad keywords that made them viable for us. Up until that point, broad match, it's kind of like it is today. It's not great for a keyword campaign. So this gave advertisers the control to expand their keyword research and expand their keyword sets, but without losing as much control as going with broad match. And you could selectively go after certain words. So it was first released in Canada in, I believe, May of 2010. And we had a client in Canada that we were working with. So I jumped on, took all their keywords that we had been matching for phrase and created fully modified broad match keywords so that we can understand how the relationship between the keyword matching, the control, and results were. And with that, I took Google's original infographic and I created a new version of it that relayed how, by anchoring different keywords, you lost control, but you gained reach. And your keyword sets, we view them as reach and control. Your exact match is your control, your broad match, or today your phrase match, is your reach. It gets you volume, it doesn't always get you as much control. So Frederick Valleys of Optimizer did an analysis a couple months ago, 162 million keywords, and he found that 89% of all advertisers in their set use broad match modified. Now that's not too bad. That means that only 11% of advertisers in that set were not. And that kind of represents some of the accounts that we audit from time to time and how some of them are set up, some good anchoring and some are not. Now, what he also found was that 95% of all broad match keywords put a plus sign in every keyword, which means they're completely anchored, which is great because that gives you the most control for your broad match keywords. And then only 5% are anchoring fewer words, which is great. This mimics how we go about keyword matching and account structure. We want as much control as we can, but then selectively, probably 5% is pretty accurate, unanchor certain words. And it gives us that great balance of control and reach. Now, there's been a lot of changes over time. And in this image, I'm showing you the blue the blue updates are positive ones for keyword matching. The red updates, well, not so great. And we'll get into those. And then the black were kind of neutral. So 2010, BMM came out. 2012, close variants came for exact and phrase match, which was optional. And what that means is that your exact and phrase match, those keywords would also map to plurals and misspellings and other common variants, which was a good thing. You know, instead of bidding under for auto loans, you could bid for auto loan and cover both variations. And then 2017, another close variant update, and it ignored word order and function words. So theoretically, there is very little performance difference between the keyword restaurants in Portland and Portland restaurants. So this variant opened up those keyword sets in a very controlled, meaningful, impactful way. Fortunately, 2018, we saw a same meaning update for exact. And the same meaning is a little subjective, let's just call it. 2019, same meaning rolled out for broad and phrase. And then last year we had these other search term updates that showing up in our search term reports that kind of hide the queries that we're going after. So the same meaning update, one of the frustrating things about this is there'll be words missing from your keyword that show up in your search term. This is a client of ours, they do personal loans, and we've got a personal loan campaign. That's a big focus of theirs right now. And there was a keyword that came up during keyword analysis, personal loans for used cars. So we added that in, and unfortunately, we have another campaign entirely for auto loans. So this was just something that sort of popped in. It was one out of probably 50 keywords. Now, what Google decided to do is with this same meaning is they remove the personal from it and they'll just map it to used car loans, which it's sort of reasonable, but that's not the intent of this campaign. So we're running into cannibalization where all the words that we want to bid on aren't always there for every search query, and that's becoming problematic. Also, variation and wrong intent. So this is for another client, a pet adoption pro bono client that we work with. And they have a rehoming program where it allows people who can no longer take care of their pets to rehome them and find them a good home to adopt their pet from them. And it's a really great program. The problem is that Google is mapping these rehoming keywords to adoption and rescue related keywords, which completely changes the meaning of it. And as you can tell, the conversions here are pretty lacking because of that. The intent is not there. And it's created a situation where we're playing whack-a-mole in all these campaigns, trying to get back to the original intent of our keyword targeting for our campaign. Another one is internal competition, where they're cannibalizing our keywords for similar meaning campaigns and ad groups. So the same rehoming client, we have dog rehoming ad groups already set up, been going for years, and we have puppy rehoming. When somebody searches for a puppy, they have a different intent behind what they're willing to do rather than a dog. And search volume is different, conversion rates are different. So what's happening is the same meaning, Google thinks that a puppy is the same as a dog, and for their limited perspective it is, but for our client it's not, and it's creating competition and cannibalization within our accounts. It still converts somewhat, but we see when this crossover happens, the conversion rates are less, which is unfortunate for the client, of course. Now, another side effect of this same meaning update is the lack of words that Google will show. So this client sells high-end furniture. Herman Miller chair is the keyword we're bidding on. And it mapped to Herman chair, which is sort of reasonable. The problem comes in is that we like to add all of our targeted keywords to an account, to an ad group, once they trigger so that we can track that data over time. So Herman chair, if this is a positive keyword for them, is one that we would like to the ad group and start tracking. The problem becomes is that if we add Herman Chair to this ad group, it has its own set of keywords and search. This keyword has its own set of search terms that it maps to. And if we follow the same principle that Herman Miller Chair will map to a Herman Chair, then a Herman Chair keyword can also map to Herman or Chair or some other variation that's unintended. So it creates this situation where we could be ever expanding our keyword list sets within ad groups and campaigns that move them farther and farther away from the initial intent of that campaign and that ad group. And that's something we need to keep track of and due diligence with negative keywords and sometimes just not adding them. All right, so the other search term update that happened last year is this new other search terms within our search term report. So this is a year to date from a client that I just took yesterday. The keywords report shows that they had 3,857 clicks. I circled it in red there. The search term report, when you add up the search terms that they identified with the 350 that they didn't, then the number matches. You know, the problems comes in where when we start looking at impressions and performance data, that the 6,800 impressions that this ad group has year to date isn't represented in our search term report in the other. Now, we can do the math on it, but that becomes problematic. And you can see that the click-through rate at 5.67% for the keywords, Google saying 7.06 for the search terms, which it's just not adding up. So then we have to ask ourselves, and we will ask ourselves continually over time, is what's going on with these 350 clicks that we generated this year that we got somewhat of a conversion value out of? And is that something that's incidental? Is that something that we want to add? And this is unfortunately the new normal, and I don't see Google changing this back. So as advertisers, we have to start understanding that our search terms are getting a little bit more vague, just like our keywords are getting a little bit more vague. Now, a couple of the other things that tell us where Google is moving is their recommendations within Google Ads. There's a whole recommendations tab. One of them is to remove your non-serving keywords. So the recommendation here for this client is remove rehoming new puppy, which is a keyword that we added that we want to target, we want to understand performance data on. Now, Google has this status that they label low volume keywords called the low search volume. And these are keywords that they are deactivated in an account. You can just have them in there. They just won't run. But Google will test these keywords for volume every week to see if there is enough volume to warrant activating it again. And this is primarily comes into play with like seasonality. So, you know, holiday shopping keywords like Christmas cards, things like that will become more popular in the fall and the winter. And like Halloween costumes, things like that are more popular in the fall. And this allows Google to recheck your keywords and reactivate them when there's enough volume to warrant it. So, but the problem is they're trying to tell us to remove all these from our accounts so that it frees up on their end some of the resources, but we lose the data that's there. Because anytime you have a keyword in your account, you have an opportunity to track it in your search terms and monitor performance over time. Another one of the recommendations is very similar. It's remove redundant keywords. So Munchkin cats for sale, Munchkin's cats for sale, pretty much the same meaning, but if we add both of these in here, we can track them over time and analyze performance, and then if they become activated again or deactivated, we'll know. But if we start removing all these redundant keywords, we lose access to that, and we lose our large keyword sets that, quite honestly, if you're doing SEO and PPC, you can take these large keyword sets, analyze the data in Google Ads, and then take that to your SEO team and start optimizing for volume and conversions. But if we start removing all these, then we lose that data, which is just never a good thing to take your data and make it cloudy. Another one of the recommendations that boggles me is use broad match versions of your keywords. Now, there's a time and place for that. But without context, by just recommending every account use broad match without really thinking through how you're doing it, it's really a recipe for disaster and wasted ad spend if you're not doing it intelligently. And unfortunately, by just making it a recommendation, there are too many advertisers out there that don't quite understand how it works, or maybe they're new to the industry that might use something like this and just activate the recommendation, which is obviously going to be problematic down the road. So our keywords are exactish. They're not, you can't quite figure them out anymore, and that's unfortunate. Yeah. Okay, so now the latest update. In February, Google announced that they're going to start treating phrase match with the same keyword to query matching algorithm that they use for BMM. And as of just last week, I got a message from John Lee at Microsoft, and they are also going to roll out and follow that same phrase to BMM matching algorithm, which is great. Anytime Bing does anything that mirrors Google, makes it easier for advertisers to run accounts, run campaigns between the two is a great thing without having to relearn two completely different platforms. Now, another part of this update rolling out is that starting in July, you're not going to be able to add any new BMMs, and in August for Bing and Microsoft. Now, what that means is that our current BMMs are grandfathered in. They will supposedly, for the end of time, which we'll see, will follow the same keyword mapping pattern that they do now. And then new ones that have the plus signs will just be ignored. They'll just act as broad, which is problematic if you're building campaigns down the road and adding new keywords. Then you've got phrase match keywords, you've got broad match keywords within the same ad group, within the same campaign, and it lacks consistency. So what we took in March is we took the approach of phrase match is going to be the new BMM. That is our reach keyword. Exact is still our control, phrase is our reach. So if phrase is going to be the new BMM, we should get out ahead of it. So we came up with two options. One, we could just start adding phrase match keywords for every BMM version that we would want to make moving forward, or we take all of our BMMs now and create phrase versions of them. And that's the option that we went with. And in doing so, we now have March, April, May, June, and into July of phrase match keywords data that we can compare to their BMM counterparts. So in doing this, we basically used AdWords Editor, Google Ads Editor. It's pretty simple. Basically, you change all your BMMs to phrase, you search and replace the plus signs to get rid of them, then you go back to your original BMMs and lower the bids. And in doing so, by lowering the bids of your original BMMs, you're then giving priority to Google to say, let's shift more of the focus to the phrase match keywords that we just added. And then we've got a longer run up between March and July for our phrase match keywords to gain history, which is very important for Google's algorithm, and that it doesn't shock the system by changing them over all at once. And we've got months to analyze the results. And over the last 2 months, I've been analyzing the results of keyword matching patterns in our phrases and comparing them to our BMMs. Now, there are minor nuances, and I won't even say that I understand them all yet, and I won't even say that they're significant. What it is to me is that the phrase match keywords now are operating similarly enough to the BMMs to be confident that we're not going to hurt our campaigns moving forward by pausing BMMs and doing away with them come July when we can't add any more BMMs. So negative keywords, they're different from, they act differently than positive keywords. It's more of a what you see is what you get, or what you see is what you negative. And They don't take into account singulars and plurals or misspellings. It's pretty much, if you're negativing out an exact match keyword, it's only going to negative out that exact. And if you're negative out an exact, for instance, men's shoe, it's going to negative out formal men's shoe, but not shoe formal men's. And then broad word order doesn't matter. So this hasn't really changed at all, which is a good thing, because if Google started changing our negative keyword matching, it's going to cause a lot of havoc and a lot of campaigns. So I don't expect them to change this anytime soon. I really hope they don't anyway. Okay, so enough doom and gloom. Let's talk about what's going up. Quickly, anybody recognize this picture here? I'll let you post it in the chat so you can get the. This is Trillium Lake, Mount Hood, of course. First time I ever went camping on Mount Hood was there. In August, there's I think it's called the Perseus meteor shower. If you've never gone up to Mount Hood camping for that, I highly recommend it. It's awesome. Okay, so we talked about the changes in match types over the years and how it's gone fuzzy, right? We didn't talk about the other changes that Google has implemented that are there to sort of combat all the negative keyword changes that they've gone through. And that's audiences. So 2013, Google added remarketing lists for search ads, which you could remarket it to your current audiences in search. This is great for targeting competitors' brands, for somebody that visited your site and then is shopping around at another competitor. It's got a lot of great applications like that, which remarketing is sort of its own thing. Okay, 2016, demographic targeting for search. That's great. Age, gender, household income. That in market the next year audiences, people actually searching to buy something. 2018, detailed demographic. That's different from demographic targeting. It should be noted. And then 2019, affinity audiences, which is a nice little twist on things. So we saw keywords get fuzzy, but yet audiences get more defined. And not only have they got more defined, they've gotten more accurate, which we really appreciate that. Okay, demographic targeting, ages. One of the things about demographic targeting is we're only seeing about 60% of searches have demographic targeting data. Some accounts down 50, some accounts up to 70%, but 60 is kind of the standard, which means about 40% of this is unknown, which that also includes children. Now, due to privacy issues, Google, especially in Europe, they can't target children, which means they can't identify them, which means your 40% unknown is your children are going to be in there. Then we have gender, same thing, 60-40% gives us the opportunity to target men versus women, which is very interesting when you start looking at search data from keywords like men's socks. It's a very male specific keyword, but when you look at the male versus female search volume there, it's not all men just searching for men's sock, especially around Father's Day. The number of women who search for men's socks goes up. And then household income, the other demographic target. Now, this is location as much as it is demographic. Obviously, household income is a demographic. It should be thought of that way. But at least here in the US, and I believe Mexico, but this is not available in Canada yet, as far as I'm aware. It's all based on census data. So here in the US, they take the zip code that you're in, and then they tie it back to census data on what they understand for the average household income for that zip code. So it's kind of like a shortcut to location targeting, and it can be very helpful for scoping campaigns one way or the other. Detailed demographics. So not just demographics, but detailed demographics. This gets into education, home ownership, marital status, parental status. It's a little bit more detailed, pun intended. Now there is employment is a detailed, but that's not available for search yet. And I'm not sure, it hasn't been available since this rolled out, and I'm not sure if they will, but you can use it for, I believe, like display and video advertising, which some of this is pretty important. I am in the middle of moving, and my home ownership searches have gone through the roof recently. And I've started to see more ads for moving companies and things like that in the last 2 weeks than I have previously. So it's kind of interesting how once you change your demographics and Google understands that, your ads that you see will change. Okay, in market audiences, this is what we call what they want. This is what people are searching for when they're in a market now. And they don't even have to necessarily be searching for it. This could be on the display network, it could be YouTube advertising as well. And it becomes a very powerful way to target people under certain circumstances. There are over 700 in-market audiences. It's got a category hierarchy. There's 24 main categories plus a whole bunch of subcategories, travel being a really huge one, and autos being another big one. And if you can find an in-market audience for something you're selling or for your client, they generally perform really well. Affinity audiences, this is what they're interested in. This is your Facebook targeting for what their interests are. 134 affinity audiences for search, 12 main categories, category hierarchy structure. And the reason I note that it's a category hierarchy is your subcategories, the further down in that category tree you get, the smaller your pool of searchers that you will have for specific categories. And that becomes important if you really want to hone in on a specific either in-market audience or affinity audience. And since Google has bid modifiers, you can set bid modifiers based on a category hierarchy to then tell Google that, hey, listen, for any regular searcher, I'll bid a bid modifier of 0%, just whatever the bid is. And if it's on the top tier category, which this is what we do, bid 1% more for that. And if it's the subcategory of that, 2% more, and a subcategory of that, 3% more. And what we're doing when we do that is we're telling Google that, hey, it's worth me paying 1% more to get more accurate impression and click data on the subcategories. And then I can do the math to add them up together later on to figure out conversions and volume. Okay, Google ad personalization. It's here. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this. It's a fantastic way of looking at what Google thinks of you. You can go to adsettings.google.com and you can control what ad personalization is for you. So this is part of me, right? Camping and hiking. Google knows that I've searched for camping and hiking stuff here in Minnesota before. They know I've used Google Maps to find campgrounds in the area. Very applicable. Now, since I'm in the process of moving, they also know that I've been interested in home storage. They also know I've been interested in living room furniture, sofas and armchairs, and real estate sales. All these things have just happened recently. They also know that I'm married. I don't know how they figured that one out, but they did. And some of these are pretty standard. The skateboarding equipment, that's because I probably did searches looking for a skateboard for my son and found a skate park near us that he can go to, and they've got an audience for that. Well, they also have some that are like, what is that? Dance? I'm not really interested. Dance? DJ equipment? Nope. Fashion designers? Nope. Discount and outlet stores? Nope. Job listings. I've had the same job for 22 years. Love it. I'm not leaving. Military. It's not, love the military. I'm just not super passionate about it. I don't do a lot of searches for it, so I don't know where that one came from. Parental status, not a parent, which is great. When I can tell my wife that when the kids are bothering me, it's like, I'm not a parent, that your kids take them. Motorcycles. I'm not interested in motorcycles either. So it can be a little bit off. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Now, it's also worth noting that a lot of these are probably triggered by clients that I have, right? Pet adoption, dogs. Pet food and pet care supplies, probably related to that client as well. Although I do have a dog, we do buy him food. I don't particularly remember ever doing any dog searches to try to find dog food or anything like that. Used vehicles, I'm not really into that, but that could be a client that, an auto loan client where I'm looking for cars. So you have to take them with a grain of salt if they're, for us marketers, work related, but yet not really personal related. All right. There's a lot of related audiences between affinity and in-market. For instance, there's a whole section of shoppers. There's a whole section of foodies, music lovers, homebodies in real estate, travel buffs, auto enthusiasts, and even used autos. And if you're in or have a client in one of these industries, it can be incredibly powerful to dig down into the category structure and find out and pinpoint exactly what you want. Even if you're not segmenting it specifically, just having the options in there in your audiences that you're targeting or in observation mode can be really powerful and enlightening for understanding your audience. One of the great things about these is if you add these to a brand campaign, you will get data on your audiences that are searching for you. So for instance, I've got a client here in the Twin Cities. They do a lot of radio ads. So we run a brand campaign for them. So we get to see all the audience data that comes in that brings their radio advertisers, their customers in through radio, that we can then measure and understand how they are specifically here in the Twin Cities area for their audiences. So one of the things that we need to understand about audience and demographic targeting is that it's either active, passive, or negative, which means active you set to targeting, which means we have to target this, it has to be included. Passive means it's an observation mode, it's sort of optional, which is you can add bid modifiers, you can collect data, which is a great way to do it. And if you're not going to actively target something, then add all of your audiences in observation mode and just start collecting the data, because the data is not going to be there unless you add them all. Negative, set to exclude. Just like negative keywords, a negative audience will completely take that out. And that becomes a little problematic because if you're excluding one audience, it could be the same person that you're excluding again. Now, it's worth noting that every click and impression that you generate, it's going to tie that data to one keyword, one age demographic, one gender demographic, one household income, and one audience per search, which is great until you start adding up the 130 in-market audiences, or excuse me, 130 affinity, 700 in-market, all the detailed demographic, and then all your remarketing audiences. And then you realize that you've got a lot of audiences in there that are splitting your data. So, Google does this to avoid data duplication and confusions. And it's generally the situation where the highest bid or bid modifier usually wins. So I talked earlier about setting hierarchy category bids, because that 1%, 2%, 3% more that I'm willing to spend to generate better data in our subcategories, I can use that later on to improve the performance of the campaigns. It's a great way of structuring a campaign with all of your audiences and getting more data and more insights down the road. Okay, so you got to watch out for negative audiences. So cats, dogs, pet food, right? This is most likely triggered heavily by the pet adoption client that we work with. Now, if we're targeting dogs, people that are interested in dogs and pet food, but I exclude cats, and I add that as a negative audience, then in this scenario, I just excluded myself because I trigger for all of these. So Google will take that exclusion and then stop showing it to me. Now, there are some situations where where excluding audiences is very viable. We've got a dating site that we work with that they do not want to generate leads from married couples. And that's a detailed marital status is a detailed demographic. So we can exclude that, knowing that that is absolutely not our audience, which is great. But for pet adoption and something like this, I don't want to start excluding everything, because users could have multiple interests that Google has identified. So in these scenarios, if I want a campaign where I really want to target people interested in dogs and pet foods, pet care, but not so much into cats, I can use a negative bid modifier of negative 90%. And what that means is that I'm essentially going to drop out of the auction for the cat people, which means it'll be ignored. And then the rest of that ad group or campaign can focus on dogs without excluding people that have double the data in here. Okay, so we went over keywords and their fuzziness, and we just went over audiences. We're at a point where we're not focusing specifically on whole keyword campaigns anymore. We've evolved beyond it. But we're not at a point where all of our audience can be reached just through audiences. So we have to start making decisions on how do we focus campaigns and segments for keywords and or audiences. And it doesn't really matter as much which road you take, as long as we get to the point where we're growing the campaign and growing the results. So we have a couple campaign segmentation and targeting options that we've been doing here. And the old school way is keyword focused. It's still very valuable for, I would say, 70–80% of campaigns that we go after. And we build exact and phrase match keywords that gives us our control and reach in our narrow themed focus. So for instance, personal loans will be in personal loans themed focus. Auto loans will be somewhere else. So audiences, will add all the audiences and we're going to set them to observe. We'll add category hierarchy bid modifiers so that we get better data. And our bidding will sometimes be manual, sometimes will be enhanced cost per click, and sometimes will be smart bidding depending on the campaign options. But this is a traditional keyword focus that has evolved to add audiences and add smart bidding. Now our audience focused is a little different, and I'll get into results and why that is. But our keywords tend to be broad, tend to be mixed, and it's not as much of the keywords that they're using as it is the people that are searching. And this is actually can be very important. But your audience has to be selective and it has to be targeted. So for instance, if you're a dating service, you want to target that dating service in market audience. Now, bidding can be manual, enhanced cost per click, or smart bidding, depending on where you're at with how much volume you're getting and your personal goals. Now, smart bidding is great when you've got enough volume, and that tends to be, the difference between doing a manual or enhanced cost per click and smart bidding is how much volume do you have to actually let Google get enough data to make smart decisions for you. Now, this third one, broad discovery campaigns. These tend to be upper funnel campaigns where we're trying to tap into an audience. We have a budget, but we're not obsessing over keywords or audiences, and they tend to be the campaigns that we'll build and go after to try to increase volume, increase results, but at a cost-effective way. Because at the end of the day, if a client has X amount of budget and we know that they have lead levels and sales levels we have to hit, this tends to be a filler and a discovery way of matching that. And the focus here on broad discovery campaigns is lower bidding, smart bidding, and ROI focused. It's more about the results overall rather than any one specific segment. Okay, client case study. Dating service we've been working with for a few years now. We built them 4 different campaigns in the last year. So these campaigns have been active for over a year. They've been optimized for over a year. And then this is data from year to date. So we built them a broad reach campaign. Keywords like dating, matchmaker, and they're broad. It also maps to a lot of competitors, Match.com, Tinder, things like that. Audiences, they're all the audiences. We add them, and they're all set to observation. The bidding, we focused on smart bidding and target CPA when we built them. Cost per lead on that is $150. That's not too shabby because it's converting and it's adding 9% of their volume in leads. We also built them a keyword focused one. So what happens with the broad reach campaign is if we find keyword segments in the broad reach that seem to be lower funnel, more theme focused keywords, we will break them out and move them into a keyword focused campaign. Keywords like dating service, city dating service, matchmaker, very, very focused, not Tinder, not Match.com, not competitor keywords, but more general. Audiences, again, add all the audiences, set it to observation. Bidding on this has been manual or enhanced cost per click. Cost per lead on that is about $200. So not terrible, but not great either. It's within target of where they want to be, and it adds 16% of their volume. So that's not too bad. Now, audiences. In this case, we wanted to know how their in-market audience for the audience dating service, how that performs differently than the affinity audiences for business professionals and people with certain degrees. So we split them up into different campaigns. Now, they're going to pretty much the same landing pages. The only difference is that with the affinity audience campaign, the ads are a little bit more targeted towards business professionals because that was the audience, that was the main audience there. Both these campaigns use broad keywords with a mix, just like the broad reach does. And interestingly enough, the search terms that these map to are very, very similar. So it's not excessively one way or the other. They're very, very similar. So the difference, though, is that the in-market dating service audience, cost per lead of $200 and only about 9% of our volume. Affinity audiences, as of recently, have started to do better this year in particular than the in-market. In-market used to be a little bit more comparable to Affinity until we started dialing them in. But Affinity, $120 cost per lead, 66% of our volume, great cost per lead, great volume. The insights here in splitting these out and addressing ad variation differences to business professionals really made a difference. This is exactly what Facebook had in mind when you can target audiences on Facebook that, quite frankly, Google got jealous of because Facebook advertisers were killing it and Google was having a hard time with keywords when Facebook ads launched. Okay, this is a local Portland pest control company we work with. So it's a great little mini case study. This one has to do with funnel keywords. So we will identify keywords for clients that are lower in the funnel, that are more likely to produce a conversion than upper funnel ones. And we will usually focus our keyword focused campaigns on lower funnel keywords. So this was a campaign that we built and we added all of the audiences in, and for lower funnel keywords. And what I did is after a couple months of running it, I broke out the audiences and started understanding how they converted against each other. So mole control and removal keywords with no audience only converted at about 4%, which was a lot lower than everything else. All in-market audiences only converted at 11%. Well, one of the problems that we have here is that there is a home and garden household supplies audience, and a subcategory of that is pest control supplies. So, but unfortunately, that audience is not available for search to either add or exclude. So it brings down our results because these are people that are looking for a DIY product to do it themselves, and this client sells a service. So that's why that's highlighted. So all audiences, 13%. Detailed demographics, meaning homeowners, people in apartments, things like that they have data on, 17%. Now, when we combined pest control and removal with lower funnel keywords with pest control in market audience, conversion rate is 33%. It's quite a bit more. That's sort of the holy grail of where you want all of your campaigns to be. And then once we have this data, we can start excluding other audiences or no audiences and just start refocusing on things depending on budget, right? Because most clients don't have a never-ending budget. So at some point, we have to make decisions on how to optimize our keywords and our accounts and our audiences to maximize the budget with the results that we're getting. So then we had that campaign built out, and we thought, well, if pest control with our lower funnel keywords is converting at 33%, what if we took some upper funnel keywords and targeted them to specifically that pest control in market audience? Well, we found that converted at 19%, which was a lot better than some of our audiences for our lower funnel keywords. So when we compare them, we see that this in-market audience with upper funnel and lower funnel keywords converts really, really well. So what that did is that opened up our keyword set to go broad, go mole, go moles, any sort of mole-related information. And then we're able to reach our audience as they're searching, even if they're not specifically searching for us yet. And that has been very powerful for this client. So I love keywords. I love the story they tell. I'm starting to really love audiences. It's hard to not love them when the results are getting so good. Now, audiences have gotten better in the last few years since they launched them. And it'll be interesting to see how privacy issues, like with Apple and their issues, are going to start to affect audiences. Because once you start to lose audiences and that data tracking, then we can start to lose performance, or it gets a little cloudy. So we'll be watching that moving forward. But all in all, it's pretty great. All right, a couple key takeaways. Let's keep it short and sweet. Keywords, what the heck? They're fuzzy. I love keywords, but this is getting a little ridiculous, Google. Audiences, great. Keep with them. Add them all, target them all. Blended targeting is really where it is. Finding your keywords, your lower funnel keywords, managing your budget with your audiences is amazing. And with that, I want to say thank you to the SEMpdx crew for having me out. Appreciate being here. I miss you guys. Can't wait for the next Engage to come back. I know it's going to be in August, virtual. But last year broke my, I don't know if it was 10 years in a row streak. So I'm looking forward to the next in-person and seeing all you guys. Thanks.
Well, James, we're looking forward to it as well. And thank you for joining us today. Obviously, you had an amazing, robust presentation. Didn't see many new questions enter the chat, so I think everyone had theirs answered throughout your presentation. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us for our May virtual event. Thank you for James for his time taking out to present to us today. And again, look for your inboxes for updates around Engage 2021 that's coming in August virtually. Again, if you're interested in membership, sempdx.org/membership. And again, of course, to our charity of choice, elevateoregon.org. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to James. Thank you to the board. And we will see you all in June. Have a great day, everyone. And I wish you all the best.